chronicles in 64 moves, I've called it, because it's a strategy. It's a game. What was happening in 2020 and 2021 was a game. We had these globalists intent on controlling and harming humanity, and we had this grassroots movement that was trying to protect humanity and stand up for humanity and build the better way. So it chronicles these moves, 64 moves, from January 2021 to January 2022, and it's kind of biographical because it's from my perspective. So I'm going to read move 61, which is the graphene conundrum. In the latter half of 2021, a wave of alarming information began to surface that would drastically shift the landscape of the COVID-19 narrative. We were bombarded with emails detailing a shocking revelation. Graphene oxide was allegedly present in the COVID-19 vaccines. These claims were initially presented by a Spanish research team, La Quinta Columna, who in June 2021 publicly released their findings. Their research, later reported by Dr. Ariana Love in Global Research, asserted that graphene oxide nanoparticles were present in all the major vaccine brands, including AstraZeneca, Pfizer, Moderna, Sinovac, Janssen, and Johnson & Johnson. The idea that such a toxic substance could be intentionally introduced into millions of people raised grave concern among scientists, researchers, and the general public alike. The original finding came from Dr. Pablo Campa at the University of Almería. In July 2021, Dr. Campa used transmission electron microscopy to identify what he believed were graphene oxide flakes within the Pfizer vaccine. His detection techniques included infrared spectroscopy and optical microscopy, both of which lent support to his claims. Numerous independent efforts to uncover the truth about what was really inside the COVID-19 injections followed. A secretive group known as the Scientists Club undertook their own analysis of several vaccine brands, and their findings concurred with Campa. Carbon-based graphene sheets and graphene oxide nanoparticles were found within the vaccines they studied. Dr. Campa expanded his testing, announcing in a report that using Raman spectroscopy, he had again identified graphene and graphene oxide in another 8 vials. This method, which analyzes molecular vibrations, further corroborated the growing suspicion that graphene oxide may indeed be a core component of these unsafe products. Other researchers like Dr. Antonietta Gatti from Italy found graphene in the vaccines too, as well as in PCR test kits and face masks. A striking revelation came from whistleblower Karen Kingston, a former Pfizer employee, who shared that graphene oxide had been deliberately hidden under the guise of trade secrets, explaining why it was not listed in the vaccine patent filings. She claimed that this omission was intentional. Kingston, like many of the scientists conducting investigations into the COVID-19 injection ingredients, seemed to be living in fear, anticipating serious consequences for this reveal. However, the most chilling revelation came from Dr. Andreas Noack, an Austrian scientist and expert in activated carbon and graphene. In a critical video released in November 2021, he explained that the frequency bands detected by Dr. Campa pointed to graphene hydroxide, a highly stable, razor-sharp material at the nanoscale. Dr. Noack warned that these nano-razor blades, when injected into the body, could cause severe damage to vital organs like the heart, brain, and cardiovascular system, shredding blood vessels. The danger lay in their invisibility. These particles were virtually undetectable with traditional toxicological methods, making them a silent and highly effective bioweapon. There certainly was a basis for serious concern, but it was difficult to know what to do with this information in December 2021. A search of the literature indicated that graphene oxide was being investigated for its potential use in mRNA gene therapy and vaccine delivery, due to its capacity to enhance binding efficiency, stability, and cellular uptake, especially when combined with materials like chitosan, a substance found in the exoskeletons of crustaceans, for example shrimp and crabs, and in the cell wall of fungi. If graphene oxide or graphene hydroxide had been snuck into these novel COVID-19 vaccines, the non-biodegradable nature of these carbon substances could trigger inflammation, clump together in the body, interact with vital organs, and interfere with our genetic material. In addition, the risk of thrombosis highlighted in some studies seemed to corroborate Dr. Nowak's dire warning about cardiovascular side effects. Also considered a disposal risk to the environment, it's hard not to question why such toxic materials would ever be considered for use in health products of any sort, let alone injectable ones. The link in the footnotes will enable you to explore this fairly extensive body of research into graphene oxide and vaccine development for yourself. Tragically, within weeks of releasing his worrying video, Dr. Nowak died suspiciously. His wife claimed that Dr. Nowak, a middle-aged man, was killed for revealing this critical information, adding to the growing fears surrounding this particular line of investigation. Sadly, the revelation about potentially lethal graphene in the COVID-19 shots created division in the fragile freedom movement. Requiring costly expertise and equipment, and with the challenge of getting hold of the tightly controlled COVID vaccine vials, the findings continue to be very difficult to verify. Ideally, in a normal world where authorities were interested in not causing harm, we would have been able to openly question these things, assemble scientists from around the world to meet together, conduct the science independently and collaboratively, compare techniques and discuss their findings. However, this was not the state of the world at the time. Thus, EBMC Squared, which is the parent company of World Council for Health, commissioned an independent analysis from a Cambridge group called UNIT. Dr. Deepti Bisht of UNIT had expressed interest and capacity to do this via email correspondence, with the objective of independently identifying any undeclared ingredients in the COVID-19 vaccines. It was a challenge to find some vials for UNIT to analyze. We eventually managed to source 4, 2 Moderna, 1 AstraZeneca, and 1 Pfizer vial, with the assistance of a hospital nurse and a couple of retired policemen. Unfortunately, access to the Cambridge-based laboratory was terminated partway through the UNIT investigation. However, when UNIT's interim and only report was published, acknowledging the limitations, the investigators' findings corroborated what other international researchers had found. In conclusion, it can be stated, this is a quote, that the 4 samples of vaccines, Moderna 1, Moderna 2, AstraZeneca and Pfizer, all contain significant amount of carbon composites, graphene compounds, and iron oxide. These ingredients were undeclared by the manufacturers and are absent from the list of ingredients for the vaccines. Sadly, the report caused a schism with our dear ally Dr. Mike Yeadon, who had kindly supported our ivermectin cause in mid-2021 and had a growing influence. Yeadon hastened to distance himself from the UNIT Commission, preemptively declaring to his large social media following that the detailed 48-page report was most likely false research. I quickly put Mike in direct contact with UNIT so that he could receive clarification from scientist Dr. Deepti Bisht and reconsider his public statements, but he kept his distance. Affording Dr. Bisht the opportunity to defend UNIT's report, she responded in an email to me, which I forwarded to Mike. Quote, "When I began the analysis, I had not hoped to find graphene oxide in it, despite the fact that I knew that graphene oxide was used in targeted therapies and also for military purposes. What I never expected was that the vials that were being rolled out to the general healthy population would have copious amounts of substance in it. In a nutshell, if these 4 vials represent the general composition of the entire rollout, then there's not only reason to be alarmed, but reason to take immediate action. As you rightly say, this is an interim report, and it warrants further analysis focused on the Raman spectrum, supplemented either by scanning electron microscopy or transmission electron microscopy, which Camper did. However, despite it being an interim report, one cannot refute the findings. Further work can only crystallize and fine-tune the findings. It would not unfind them." To my knowledge, Mike did not respond directly to Bisht. expressing a fear to me that the issue being discovered by international scientists independently may be enemy action designed to distract us. Thus, a lid was put on any constructive scientific discussions about how to further address and elucidate the graphene issue, relegating it to the realms of a conspiracy theory once more.
Do you think Mike Eaton's been
I'm not saying that at all, no. The conundrum of whether graphene was consistently present in the shots, along with its type, risks, and intended purpose, became an issue that we could no longer openly discuss, lest it cause further division in an easily fractured movement. To the gratitude of many, including me, Dr. Eden continued to speak out very strongly against the experimental COVID-19 vaccines as well as the broader globalist agenda. However, a niggling worry remained. It is legitimate to question any figure who has worked closely with large corporations or organizations like Mike, Dr. Malone, and me. How does their history and investment inform their present stance, especially when it involves controversy? Thus, let me state here that I have no financial interest in the pharmaceutical industry, no investment portfolio, no grants from individuals with industry ties, foundations, or organizations. I have no competing interests when it comes to my work on ivermectin, vaccines, or any other drugs. In addition, I no longer have a relationship with the World Health Organization or the Cochrane collaboration. My work and income from these organizations ended in December 2021, when I made a conscious choice to separate from them in good standing. It seemed unlikely that Mike would hold shares in Pfizer and other mRNA gene therapy manufacturers in 2021, being among the first to sound the alarm on their dangers and give his adamant position against the COVID-19 shots. However, a former chief scientist and vice president of the Allergy and Respiratory Research Division at Pfizer, Mike was also the co-founder and former CEO of the biotechnology company Xiarco, which sold for in excess of $300 million in 2017 to Novartis AG. Of course, ivermectin, emerging also as an inexpensive treatment for various cancers, would represent serious commercial competition to Novartis AG, for example, which had several novel cancer drugs in development. My co-authors describe Eden's relationship with his former industry as that of waiting for rain. There is nothing to do but to wait until the rain falls, they say, highlighting that obedience is required in successful unions between parties of different rank in the following metaphor. The sovereign gives his daughter in marriage. So in the book, whenever my co-author is speaking, I write in italics, so you can see that it's from the I Ching quoted directly. The sovereign gives his daughter in marriage. This brings blessings and supreme good fortune. By his decree, the imperial princesses, although higher in rank than their husbands, had to obey them like all other wives. Here too we are shown a truly modest union of high and low that brings happiness and blessings. In this metaphor about marriage, my co-authors suggest that Eden's relationship with his former industry, which had brought him supreme good fortune, needed to be handled with care and humility during the COVID-19 crisis, acknowledging its complexity. In 2021, in addition to having cancer drugs in the pipeline, Novartis AG was also actively involved in manufacturing the COVID-19 mRNA products, including the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. This seems a delicate situation for sure. I have often wondered what correspondence and conversations Eden might have had with his former industry colleagues about the dangers of this biotechnology. Perhaps one day Mike and I will have this much overdue in real life conversation. It would be great to get together and discuss this, as well as points of current scientific debate. The lesson to us all here is that it is not only our past affiliations that shape our present, but the way we navigate the inevitable tensions between loyalty, ambition, and truth in a world where corporate interests and personal convictions often collide. Furthermore, it raises interesting questions such as what establishes our integrity in a movement demanding honest, independent thought and authentic action? What establishes our credibility in a movement seeking the truth?
Lovely. Very good.
Oh, excellent. Can I just say something?